Hello everybody, my name is Dave Snyder. I'm continuing a series here on how to style up terminals. I'm a designer that loves working in the terminal, love working in Vim, and I've switched over to Linux for some reason over this past year, so I didn't find a whole lot of tutorials on how to actually theme up Linux, so this is my attempt to try and make something original that might help some folks out. Last time we left, we were using a system called Flavours. Flavours is basically a Base16 manager. It allows you to rewrite a bunch of files so that you can take a theme color that's coming from a Base16 system. So Base16 system is basically 16 colors. You have 8 of them that are tones, and then another 8 that are a variation of some sort of color system that's on top. And then you can use Flavours to actually apply the theme and switch out all your configs. So last we left, I was just trying it out. I hadn't gotten everything converted. You can see at this point, I've got Rofi converted. I have my notification systems converted. You can see Vim here that is converted as well. And I've also started using an actual color theme that I've made, which I'm dubbing Red Mars. So again, the theme of these videos, I had started with saying, hey, I'd really like to make a theme system based upon or sort of inspired by the novels of Kim Stanley Robinson. So the Red Mars, Blue Mars, Green Mars trilogy, where you have Mars being terraformed. So I wanted to make, like, I don't know, a theme system based upon that stuff. And I've now got it to a point where you can just run one-liners and everything sort of flips out. Even you notice the background flipped out as well. And if we were to run again our Dunt system to get our notifications, you can see the colors switching there. You can see up here in the top left and top right that polybar is switched out. If we look into Rofi, we can see Rofi is being pulled in as well. And even if we were to run bat, within here, we can see that, not bad. If we run FCF, you can see that that stuff gets loaded as well. So to me, absolutely fantastic. This is exactly what I wanted it to do. And it took me probably a little while to figure this stuff out. I wanted to go, before we start talking about color theory, I want to talk just a little bit more about Flavours, because I figured out a lot of the things that had me stumped in that last video. So we're going to load up here just a diagram that I've made that describes what's actually happening. And in fact, before we do that, let's look and see what's actually happening when we're loading up, when we're running that Blue Mars or Red Mars or whatever sort of system. In fact, let's do it with Green Mars, make it fun. If we go into I use fish, and so I've got some fish scripts which I use to set aliases. I just have 3 aliases now set. 1 Red Mars, 1 Blue Mars, 1 Green Mars. There's not too much that's in this alias. It is running FE or FEH. I don't know how you are supposed to pronounce that one. FE is what I'm using to control my backgrounds. So I've got 3 different screens. I'm a Battle Stations person. And it's sort of laid out against me. So it's going to run and set up those backgrounds. Then it's running our Flavours, apply Red Mars. And then the last thing it's doing is this SF alias is just sourcing fish, which is going to make sure that everything in my current terminal gets reloaded. So getting back to that, let's go look at our diagram here. So what is actually happening when Flavours apply Red Mars gets run? Well, it is taking a config file that Flavours has, which lives in flavoursconfig.toml. And if we were to look at this over on a file over here, let's close out some of these windows and open up our config, flavoursconfig.toml file. What we'll see is that there's individual items, again, that map to the file that we want to replace. So we were showing off the last video replacing the Alacrity YAML file with our own template. I'm doing that for i3. I'm doing it for Polybar. I'm doing it for neovim. I'm doing it for bat or Rofi, so that when you load up Rofi, you're going to get different colors for each one of these. When we look at these individual items, the big three things that are happening is that there's the file that you're replacing. There is the subtemplate, which is the existence of where does that template live within your local share flavors directory. Then you were saying whether you rewrite it or not. Rewriting just means you're going to replace the entire contents of that file. Sometimes you're going to want to do that. Sometimes you're just going to want to replace a partial part of that file, which you used with flavors like commenting system. We showed that in the last video. If you want to learn how that part of it goes, there's a lot more detail there. Lastly, there's a hook that can be run. And this is something that I just figured out in between these two videos. Basically, the hook is what you're going to use to reload or rerun or kill the process that needs to be killed, so that when it restarts, it's going to restart with those coloring systems. So if you look real quick, when we change coloring from, for example, green Mars back to red Mars, look at Polybar, look at the top part of this page. You'll notice that everything dies for a second and then reloads back in. And that's because if we were to come in here and look for our Polybar hook, you'll see that we're actually sending a hook that's saying, hey, Polybar, go restart. We've changed your files. That's something that we're doing for almost everything in here. The most complicated one that I ran into was with Vim, where I actually needed a handy Python script that I found online. I'm going to post it somewhere in the description for this video, but all that thing does is it looks for every single open version of neovim and makes sure that neovim itself sources the init.vim file, which I'm using to load this stuff. As you can see by this purple bar that's here, it's not perfect. It messes up occasionally when you run this stuff. So if we were to come and look back at this config, you'll see the bars now, pretty much there. That's the only slight hitch that I still haven't fixed yet. Otherwise, every one of these files is going through and being rebuilt. You can see bats being rebuilt. PCOM is getting a bunch of coloring. Dunst is getting reloaded. And that's just giving us a way to do all this stuff all at one time. So let's go back, relearn what some of this stuff does. Inside, the file that's being referenced here in the template is basically your template file, which is a mustache file, which itself is using variables for where all the colors need to be loaded. And then those colors are coming from a schema file that as well lives within that local directory and then gets applied to the template. And what you end up with is a fully functioning file that your file system is going to be reading. In this case, it's saying, okay, I'm changing the Dunst.rc file. I'm now substituting in the colors that are coming in from Base7, which here is FDFB. And you can see that that's what ends up loaded. And then lastly, it runs that hook command. That's how Flavors works. It works pretty flawlessly as far as I've seen. Outside of needing to reload these scripts, Flavors itself is extremely fast. It's very stable. I haven't seen it mess up any of my files. I've used it in a bunch of different configurations, and it's been pretty perfect. So at that point, we now have the system side of this thing, working. It's actually loading things by putting an alias level on top of it, like we showed with that fish file. I can actually as well run other commands like, hey, source the fish file itself, change the backgrounds, do all that kind of fun stuff. Let's get down now to how did I come up with colors? Maybe you're not a designer. Maybe you don't think that you know how to pick colors like this base system that's here. That's not true. You can do this. It's not that hard. I'm going to show you how to do it kind of right now. The first thing to do, though, is you really need to look at this base 16 system. There's 16 of them. 8 are going to be the tones. 8 are going to be the colors. In the beginning, you want to focus on the tones first. Base 00 is going to be your background. So for us, it's this reddish dark background that's here, right? If we were to switch to our blue Mars one, we're going to get a different color system, right? And now base 0 is this color here. If we were to look at our YAML file, that's our schema for this color system, base 00 is going to be this one for us. Now, how do you arrive there? How do you pick colors? How do you make colors like work? You may think, I just don't really understand this stuff. You're an engineer, more than likely, if you're looking at this video, and you're not a designer. The truth is that most design is actually math kind of in the background. And really all that you need to do is start with one color and the rest kind of follow from it. So I'll show you how I generally do stuff like that. Normally the way that when I generate my own scheme, the first thing that I do is I go to this terminal.sexy website, which it's terribly named, but whatever. And I'll go and change I'll figure out what I want my background to be. So if I was in this red Mars vibe, I'd be like, okay, I kind of want a reddish one. For me, I wanted something that was a little more earthy. So I dropped some of the saturation out of it and made it, a little darker. Now, the next thing that you do is you come and take that color. So for example, let's recreate this blue one, which had this as our base color. You can see now that, our main base matches the website one here. How do we get the rest of those tones that we need to generate? It's as easy as taking the color scheme and dropping it in with, let's put it with a color picker in there. And then what you want to do is click this color hexia website that's going to be here. It's going to give you that color that's selected. More importantly though, you want to scroll on down to the shades and tints area. And right here, this is our cheat for what we actually need when we generate base 16. And again, specifically, remember how I said the switch between base 3 and base 4 is a pretty big gap. Now, when we look at this color system, this one here with the dot is the color that is our base 0, which is this 21 2A value. The way that I got the rest of these values beyond it, and if we look again back at that base 16, we're just going lighter and lighter till we get to base 4. So it's easy. We'll skip every 2 on this shade, and it'll give us our colors. So start with 21 2A, then we're going to go to 2F3. And you'll notice that's exactly what I'm doing. Then we're going to go from 2F3, we're going to jump to 3D4. And you can see 3D4 is there. And then for our last color, we're just going to go to 4B6. 4B6 is the color that we've done there. So that's going to cover our shading for our top 4. To do the text colors, which are, again, when we look at the base 16, that's where that gap's happening. We need these 4 text colors. These are the ones that are going to be used for text. Whether they are the comment views, they're also used, as you can see, as I'm visually checking within this file. If we were to look at comments, you can see that the comments file is loading up with one of those colors as well. All that we're going to do is do the opposite. We're going to take it from the tint value and we're going to start at the top. I like very contrasty themes, which means I always try to make my text color really like a kind of a close to a white. And so if you see with base 7 that's here, we're starting with that FBC FD1. I'm then jumping 2, and I'm just, in this case, I'm going backwards. And so you can see the next one, E2E, E2, which one did I do? 1, 3. Did I actually mess up my skip here? FBFC, E2. Huh. Well, this would have worked as well. I may have had like a slightly different color, but all that you need to do is essentially pick and skip the colors as you end up walking through the color value that's here. And that's all that you need to do to get both your dark shades and then your light shades. That will build out your tones. So you've got your tones. How do you pick the colors that are here? This is where you have a lot of preference. And the biggest suggestion that I can give you is that when you're looking against your base 16 values, and I'm going to bring it up here in a different window so that you can look at it. If we look at the ones that I picked that are here on this side, you'll see that I'm following the color scheme, like the actual hues very similar to the ones that are defined there. It's very important that you do this. Don't just switch out base 8 from being a red to making it like a purple or something. You can definitely do it, but most of these theme managers and these theme systems, if you're going to be using somebody else's template, they're almost always written under the assumption that these colors are being used within the same spot, so that especially if you're living in a Western country, your color tones are going to be very specific to the types of usages that are there. What do I mean by that? I mean that if we were to look at an error that happens in a file. So let's go again to that tooltip file that I've been loading up quite a few times at this point. Don't mind the red color there. It's because we haven't sourced this file. Let's make an error that shows up within this file. Let's pull a file that doesn't exist. You can notice that the error that's being loaded is in red. And that's because no matter what theme I'm using, the first color for base 8 is always going to be a red. Similar, I follow this almost all the way through the train until I get to the last two. The last two I consider reinforcements of the color theme that I'm using myself. So what do I mean by this? Let's look at these three here. And I'm going to close this out so that we can make this a little bigger. In fact, let's just silo it so that we've got a pretty good example of it. If we're looking at these three colors, the top ones are actually all the same until you get to the last two. So if we look at this blue one, we've changed the tones on all of these, but the actual colors for, base 8 through, I believe this is OF, or actually OD, end up using the same color scheme, and then we use the last two to reinforce the colors of the theme itself. So what we're saying is that we're going to use reds for this one, we're going to use blues for this one, we're going to use greens for this one. Why that becomes important when you're building a theme out like this, and we're going to show it off a little bit by loading up some code. And so again, let's go in here, let's load up that tooltip file that I don't know why I always load this one up. By the way, this is the EUI design library that I work on in my day job. It's Apache 2. It's fun. You might dig it. I work on it with a bunch of really super awesome people over at Elastic. So we've got our coloring here. And what I want you to pay attention to when you're looking through this stuff is the focus of the blues that are happening in this file. We have more blues that are happening, but the reds and the yellows are pretty much constant, but it's these blues that change quite a bit. So let's actually load up a new file to kind of show that off. And I'm going to move this file out of the way for a moment so that we can do that. Let's now switch this to red Mars. Now, what you're seeing within this file is that we have a larger abundance of reds that are showing up in the file. There's still, as you can see, the blues and the greens, but they are definitely much less than what we saw happening within that blue Mars set. And so now if we come back to that right about the same line, you're seeing that those reds are being substituted with some blues. Same thing will happen now when we run green Mars. We load up this file. You can see now that those files are getting definitely a lot more of the green tones. And so if you're making a connected theme like this, what I would definitely suggest is use the last two values of base 16 because they don't get used as often, and you can use them as highlight colors that you're going to call out. Very specifically, if you notice in these window borders that I'm doing, it's using this color. And if we reload and use red Mars, what we'll see is that we're now using this color. And so that gives us something that's very unique that we can always rely on to do coloring. What it also means, though, is that as we make these errors, right, we mistype Boolean, we want this to always remain red regardless of whatever system we use. So now you can see as we change Boolean, you'll see that it is still going to keep that red value. Now, in this case, I haven't 100% tweaked these themes yet. So to me, this red on this screen is not readable enough. It probably means that I need to do a little bit better job of messing with the tones that I'm using for this these sets of greens. Potentially, it just needs to be a little bit darker, or I need to bring that red value up. I'm going to cover that in a later video where I think we'll do a lot of really, really deep color theory, because to get this stuff really colorblind safe, we need to actually do another layer of math, basically adding a bunch of variants to our color systems by using luminance as our main deciding factor between our values. The reason we do that is because if you look at these colors that I've picked here, almost always you'll notice that the colors that are picked, which isn't fantastic. Well, why is that one not? Here we go. You'll notice that the blue one that's in here and that green, they're actually, come on Figma. You'll notice they're pretty much in the same spot, which means all that I did was I came in here and shifted the color from one to the other. And you can see that as I'm doing it there to make it that green. That works as a really good way to make sure that your color matches. It's a terrible way to make sure that you generate color safe colors, because if somebody has like a color blindness, especially with reds and greens, which are the most common, if this red and this green are pretty much that same exact luminance value, they're going to actually show and read as the same exact color, which is not something that we want to do. It's okay for the green to show up kind of as a red, at least make it a different shade so that people can distinguish between the two. Super important to do that stuff. Anyways, that's about as far as I got on this stuff. I really just wanted to talk more about flavors, and I think I've kind of perfected that system, got it running. I think the actual system side of this stuff works. There's now like little problems, like you can see for some reason Polybar is not loading the temperature stuff here perfectly. You can see this purple color that gets loaded when I do these switches. They all tend to fix themselves as soon as I reload and jump back in. So, you know, again, like you can see with that blue that's showing up, it's because I'm running it in a different window that's not being sourced. If I ran Green Mars again here and then did that same thing and loaded it up, it's going to work. You're never going to get it 100% perfect, especially with Vim. You know, I talked about that Python file that I needed to run to actually reload and source those files for open windows. You're going to need to do some tricks basically to make sure that things get updated all the time. In reality, though, you're probably not going to be switching teams every 2 seconds, kind of the way that I am, and you're going to be okay probably with something that's equivalent of this, which is, hey, I'd like to run Red Mars, and it's okay. I'm going to close these windows, load up a new one, and understand that it's perfectly fine. And all this stuff runs the way that I want it to. Anyways, that's where I've gotten to. I think it's pretty cool. What I've learned to love about Linux and why I continue to work with it is it's eminently hackable. All these systems may be a little bit separated, but I can tie them together to make something work that is truly unique. And at that point, we're getting close to the part of the internet that I loved, which was that early 2000s era where you could make your Chrome, and Chrome wasn't around back then, you could make your IE5 or whatever, like whatever color you wanted it to be. Firefox still has a lot of those types of things in it. I just like being able to do it at an OS level because I like using my computer the way that I want to use my computer. And that just means a lot of customization, and it means making key commands, doing all kinds of fun stuff, changing up how my Vim works, changing how my notification systems work, you know, even doing crazy stuff like I put the theming so that it works here within Flameshot. And you can see it's actually taking the color themes that we've set from red Mars, which is the green and that sort of, you know, this sort of beige from it. And as I go and sort of save this file out, you'd say, oh, it's going to tie with my dunce notification. And now, you know, when I load it up here, I've got like essentially I've made my own cloud app to do this stuff. So all this stuff combined together, I just kind of dig. I'm getting really close, I think, on where I need this to be. The things that I'd like to do, I love this background for the red Mars one. I'd like to make like a connected theme of backgrounds. I'm not a fantastic artist, especially on the visual side. So I'm going to have to be pretty clever there and maybe go something a little bit more abstract. But we'll come up with something that will work with all three of these. And then we'll just tweak these colors. But that's the basics of how you get to a usable Base 16 system. Again, follow the main system that's there, pick those tones with that hard split between it, and you should be pretty good. Anyways, hope you had fun with these videos. Please ask questions if you want to learn about this stuff. I have to go to like 1 million GitHub repositories to learn this thing, so hopefully it's been helpful for people. I'll see you next time.